So I'm supposed to push the button, right, Dave?
A volunteer for the Pledge of Allegiance. I was told to ask the person on my right, so that would be you.
I would love that.
Stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. McCarty, is there any public comments? Okay, thank you. I would like to reorder and put the consent agenda, move it up.
So, any objection?
No, do I need to have?
Let me see if I can move it then.
Okay. It's just other discussion will probably take a little while since it's Mr. Hicks. And
That's always You resemble that.
we're complete opposites, that's okay. Okay, so does anybody need anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
What item, Mrs.
Just
Knapp?
the minutes are revised since the last time I reviewed them. What is the revision?
The revision?
It's,
It says that the minutes have been revised.
Mrs. Mc-
Item number 8.
mm-hmm.
Mrs. Knapp?
Yes, please. Item number 6. Item number 6 is meetings of the December 1st and 15th board meetings, and it says it was revised, and that has happened since I reviewed them, so what was revised?
I believe the revisions were as we were, I'll have to open them up and look at them to tell you exactly there, but what happened as we put those together and from Lynn working with the notes until Dana came back and put them in the format, I believe there was no substantive change.
There were no changes at all. What it may have been, Ms.
So the revision's in the agenda, not in the minutes?
Correct.
Okay.
So you don't,
Well said.
And the agenda wasn't revised, there was just an additional attachment added. That's the only thing I can think of
Okay.
for why it would be showing that way.
Okay.
so you
Thank
don't
you.
need anything pulled, that's,
No.
Well, I do have a question. I thought we agreed on those two.
what was your question?
Well, that's an agenda item later today,
Okay.
so we'll vote on those today.
Okay, perfect.
So
Okay.
are we pulling any consent items then?
No, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
No.
Let me get back to the agenda item then.
Okay, I was waiting for, Dana, are you ready?
No, I'm
Okay.
trying to get back there now.
Okay. Well, when Mrs. McCarty is ready, I will just need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So this was on the minutes, right?
Mhm.
This is on the. this
I'll
is on
move
the
that we approve the
consent
consent
Okay, so
agenda
it
as
happens
presented.
tonight.
You're right.
Second.
I'll see if,
I
She-
need a moment. I'm
no,
not
no, that, no,
sure with system, so.
well, we do need something for them
Now,
down silence time. You all set? Judy? And
David
Mr.
seconded.
and David second.
Members, please vote. All right, passes. So let's go on to agenda item number 5, discussion regarding budget, including capital needs. Mr. Hicks?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Darwin Stifler, colleagues, and community members. We're here tonight to do a study session or a budget presentation. I've put together a few slides to start us with the conversation and move us in a direction. But please, as is the current, the expectation during study session is to really get the governing board speaking. So please interact or interject at any point that you see necessary. So first is, just to give a good overview, we will go over the bond program. It is a mid-year history that I've always done just so that you guys are aware of where we are in our bond program, what we're selling, what we're doing, just a good overview. I'll talk a little bit about the state of the state and what the governor's executive summary was for his proposal for the state. If there may be a few other legislative bills that are going through. Then we'll jump into our budget development, just so you can get a little update of where we are on our team. And then, of course, we will have Ms. Jackie Munchler, our classified representative, to give an update of the budget team to see where we're at that point. So the bond program. Now, I realize this is difficult to read, so I did print these off. So I'm just going to pass these around right now. If you could take one packet and pass it, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so it is the same thing that's in the presentation, it's just, maybe it's a little easier to see a little bit closer up. So here, just to want to show, number one is, as you can see in the middle column where it says 7/1/2016 with an asterisk that's bolded, that is our current fiscal year. So with the bond sale that we had this summer, this July, of $28 million, it took our total cumulative bonds sold for the 2012 bond program to $125 million. If you follow that same line of the 125 over to the right, you could see there's a number that says 69.6%. So that is how much has been sold of the bond. So of our $180 million bond program, you could see we're approximately 70% of the way sold. And then in our basic categories of technology, facilities, transportation, and then just the cost of the bond sale, you could see where we are, and this is as of December 15th, for either expenses and or encumbrances. So you could see, for example, the expenses for each fiscal year, 12 million. If for technology, you could see the grand total, the first year 12 million, 7 million, 6 million, then this year 4 million. If you follow it all the way over to the right, you would then be able to see that we have spent 31 million of the 40 million of technology, and that is a 77% of our technology bonds that are earmarked for bonds have been sold. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that is just to give a good overview. Now, the one change, so historically, this sheet showing it did have, when I first got here, we moved really quickly to try to sell the bonds as soon as possible, and so it had a future projection of only 2 additional sales. This is spreading it out now over 4 sales to slow the program down. It does have a couple benefits with the failure of the 2016 bond. It allows us to slow down the program, which means we're asking for less, so we're lowering the tax rate slightly in that sense. It helps from some of our facilities in a sense that Mr. Deeg, our facilities administrator, as he's trying to implement flooring, painting, and I have another slide that will go over that. It's better if I use this example with our budget team. If we replace 135 buses all the same year, they're all going to break down the same year. So sometimes when you spread it out, it actually is better for the replacement schedule thereof, and managing it is also easier to manage. So this does help our facilities department a little bit in that sense. And so just wanted to, the one highlight. Now, I have not fully gone over this with Stiefel, which is our financial advisors with bond people, because there is a negative when you sell more, when you have more sales. It does cost more, because, so you can see down the bond expense is now up to 520, and so we're probably spending an extra 50 or 60 grand to do these sales from that standpoint, and so we'll have to balance that. So I guess I'm saying I reserve the right to move it back, but I'll be working with Mr. Lumberg, who's our financial advisor on our bond program, to see how much impact this would have on our taxpayers and where we are in the program. So I'm trying to balance all of those, but I just wanted to point that out, that would be spreading it out and slowing it down a little bit. Any questions on that? All right, then the next one, really this is just just move to the visual. You could see of the money that we spent so far, where are we at? So visually, you could see the majority of what we spent so far is in facilities. Site improvement I include in facilities, so you add those two together, we're at $64 million, 31 in the technology, 12 in transportation, just a very small amount in the bond sale.
For what time period is this for?
This is for, if you go to the next slide, you can see that's the grand total, so that is the $108 million, so that is from beginning until December 15th. So that graph, that pie chart, represents, you can see 60,095,000 on the last slide in facilities, lines up with the 60,095,000 on facilities on this slide. So you can see that's for 13, 14, 15, 16, and so far half of this year.
Thank you.
Good question.
Mr. Hicks, what's the difference between facility improvement and site improvement?
Madam President, members of the board, facility is more building, site is more when you're doing landscaping and
Aesthetics?
and those type of things that are more with the ground in that sense,
Okay,
the site.
thank you.
Facility is building. And so this, the intent really just is try to show year by year how much we're spending in each one of those categories. So you could see each one of the categories on a year by year basis. How much has been allocated? So down the middle of the document, the first grid is the total allocated through 2017. So you could see the group by group. So far through this year, facilities has been allocated the 71 million. So they still have So if you add up the facility site together, you're at 64 million. They still have 5.5 million from December 15th to the rest of this year that they could spend. So they start planning on it, working on it. So a lot of our contracts do start in the summer. They don't end in June, but they start in this year. We have to have some commitment in the financial for it, but it doesn't all get spent in this year. So this was just to show the intent of how much is available for this year. So you can see there's still, if you go over to the far right, there's 15 million still left that has yet to be purchase orders or commitments against those. Doesn't mean it's not planned for, it just means that there isn't purchase orders out for it right now. Then you just subtotaling again the 180 by category. So I keep slicing the information a little bit different, a little bit for you to see, so you could still see that total remaining for facilities is about $52 million.
President Picarelli, I can ask a question.
Sure.
Mr. Hicks, would it be fair to say that once upon a time, that whole facilities improvement fund, we would have called maintenance? We would have been paying for that out of capital funds provided by the state?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Darwin Stifler, that seems very long to say all that. I apologize. Didn't think of that. It's just instinctual. I would say yes and no. So it's a part of it, I would say, is our capital, our district additional assistance. The other is the building renewal program. So there's maybe multiple places. It still all comes from the state, but different than just capital. What I refer to is, when I say capital, I'm normally referring to our district additional assistance or unrestricted capital. So for that answer, I would include the building renewal program, which is still also funded by the state.
And I would also say you're young, so you don't remember the really old days.
Yeah. Well, I was around for the capital levy area back in the day, so I do remember some. I'm older than I feel.
So Dr. Stifler, if I'm reading you right, and correct me if I'm not, you're wondering how much of these facilities expenses we're paying for with a bond that might otherwise have been funded by the state of Arizona.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Okay, maybe we could have that number highlighted at a later date.
And Mr. Hicks, for the remaining balance, how long do we anticipate this to last us?
Members of the board, if we just go back to the
It's
other,
on
you
the
could,
first.
it's on the very first one, the bond schedule. Here's how we plan on spending the money. So
Oh,
it's
it's 2020?
going 2020. The summer of 2020, so it'll go through the fiscal year 21. And that is intentional because we're slowing it down. We would, on our original scale, we would be done in 2.5 years, but we're slowing the program down.
With your permission, Madam President, perhaps a
Yep.
bit less formal. Our staff has worked very hard to put some schedules together, and so our schools know we're going to get paint in this year, we're going to get flooring in this year, we're going to get these things in this year. We know that those needs are going to continue. We wouldn't be able to do any of those things without this bond funding to do that. We can see the point at the end where we know those needs are going to continue, if this is what your question was about, that those needs are going to continue, but there is no identified funding in order to accomplish those expected maintenance needs of our buildings.
And is somewhere in here a contingency plan if an emergency like last week?
There is very little. There is very little. Ken can speak more precisely, but there is very little. We are working to get better. Better is the wrong word, to crack the code on the school facilities board. But as we've spoken before, the school's facilities board is not about regular maintenance. It's about after it's failed. And that puts our mission and our students, could possibly put our mission and our students and our employees in peril when those things fail. So we work very hard to be in a position for them not to fail.
Thank you.
To be out ahead of that. And so these bond funds have allowed us to, I won't say that we've kept pace, but we haven't fallen as far behind as we might have. I would invite Mr. Hicks to clarify anything that I said. But
Members of the board, I think he was right on in a sense. We have very little contingency. If remember that the assessment done on our facilities showed that there was a need of $247 million of repairs, and so this is not obviously $247 million to do all those repairs. And so when you do that, you're making choices about what is and what isn't being repaired. And so we do already have schedules. They are out on our intranet, and so anybody can see when is our painting schedule, interior, exterior, and flooring. That is the main area. And there's another slide here to go through some of those areas. But with very little contingency, that really means that if something come up that was an emergency that was not planned for, that means that is something we are now not doing. So something that is already planned and communicated to our sites, that will not be done. And I think it is an accurate statement to say almost all of the facility side of it are funds that, with state funding, we probably would have been able to manage in that sense. And so the difficulty is, I mean, replacing this roof. I mean, those that have known when they've been there, when it rained and the wind was blowing, it rained in my office. That was on a regular basis. You know, luckily, we didn't have winds, you know, exceeding 15 miles an hour when it rained. But I knew to move all my computers and put a bucket on my desk. But it was because we prioritized everything at the sites, and we did not have the funds to do everything that we needed to do. And so we did have to prioritize. So even though we got a new roof, and thankfully, and nobody notices, it looks exactly the same as the one before, it is very beneficial. And these are maintenance items that you do have to take care of those assets, or they start deteriorating and falling apart.
Thank you.
And we paid for that with the bond,
We paid for that with the bond.
instead of the state of Arizona.
Yeah. So just to transition into the next slide, very hard to see that one. But as you can see on the top of that, so your handout is much better on that. You can see the Administration Center facility improvement, $1 million. Over 900 of that was the roof. So when you're looking, so one of the next things, information we wanted to provide the board was just a site by site in those categories, how much money has been spent on every site. So here you're able to see exactly site by site. You'll be able to see that through December 15th, Cactus High School has had $12.8 million provided at their site for repairs and renovations or equipment in the sense of technology. And so this is more just informational, so if you would like, I could take a second here while you go through it, or if you want to ask questions later, I'm okay with this. It's just long, it's every single site, and it's really just the categories. The technology, when you're looking at that category, that's really the Wi-Fi, devices, projectors, the network.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Hicks, because yesterday Advanced Ed brought up the point of technology and resources. How does this play into what their recommendation for improvements are?
Members of the board, that's a great question. Let me just jump through. I did the slides out of order because this
No.
was done a long time ago, but let's go, this one just
I
goes.
have one more question real quick.
Oh.
Dr.
no,
Stifler,
that is
you
the right
made
one.
rounds prior starting, and you went around to all the teachers and asked for needs. When you guys decided what facilities needed improvements, how did you guys prioritize them?
That predates me, first of all, is the first thing. And we used an outside consultant to help us, and we also worked with building administrators to help us highlight, and we put those things together. So we have residents, we have experts within the district in our maintenance team. We have a very impressive team who are expert, they're contractors, they're expert in knowing what needs to be done. We asked our principals, but I believe we reached out before we ever did that, and we had somebody come in and analyze our facilities and to do that. So, as Mr. Hicks said, it's an ongoing, oops, nobody knew that thing was gonna break, we have to fix that, right? So there's some surprises, but as we stay out in front, so this is a schedule that was previous. The change from my time here is working with Mr. Gay, working with Mr. Hicks, we've accelerated the technology a bit, and Mr. Hicks is gonna get there, but regarding maintenance, my tenure has not altered that schedule at all.
Thank you.
At least, I don't think that it has.
Dr. Stifler, perhaps our newest board members would like to see the 5-inch binder.
You could do that. About, here's the $240 million of things that you need to do to fix your district, to take care of your buildings so that they don't fall down, and that was the list in 2013. Or in 2012.
That's in 10.
Thank you, Kathy. Great point.
Members of the board, but then just to add a little bit more, because it does predate Darwin in the sense that almost every category, once you start working on it, the need is based on what is going to fail first. So it is basically, so for example, our flooring right now, not that this is something to celebrate. I think I saw Trina here. One of our first areas of our flooring after we figured out how and what we want to do is heritage. We have carpet that is 31 years old at Heritage. So that is at the top of the list, so that is going first in that sense. So it is that is either in worse shape or that is the imminently going to fail first is what we do first. And then it continues. And that does get reassessed. For example, we will be hopefully doing Sunrise Mountain and Centennial HVAC systems this summer. They've actually been on the list every summer for the last 3 years. So they keep getting deferred, saying they could last another year. And, they're at the end. We do some minor upgrades, a compressor here or there to keep it going. But we reassess everything to see what's the greatest need as we're going in that sense. So we continue to reassess.
Is all the carpet at Heritage 31 years old?
Members of the board, I'm sure there's a square or two that's not, or a room that's not.
The one classroom that was set on fire last year.
There you go. So that was replaced in a sense. So not everywhere, but it is the worst place we have in the flooring for carpet in that sense. And
Holy
it is,
cow. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
It is.
Mr. D has done an exemplary job, in my judgment, over the last semester on putting schedules in place, and schools and principals are very excited to know when things are going to be delivered at this point. And so that's a good thing. And that's a very professional practice to have. It's a difficult thing to fund, right? So if the life of carpet is 15 years, then you want to go through everything, and at the end of 15 years, you want to start again. If I don't want to see Mr. Hicks have a meltdown here, but what's the length of paint for a school, right? And how often to do that? But we're in catch-up mode right now.
If I could just draw your attention back to the sheet, I just did want to show we did, so this is the schedule, just for your information. So if you're hearing questions or you have any concerns, over the years, here's when we plan, how much we spend on painting, interior, exterior, our EMS system, carpeting, our fire alarm control panels, HVAC. You can see when we're doing the work, in what fiscal year, how much we're planning on. The one big issue, and so I will say, this is one thing we are discussing at our budget team came up, is the purchase existing solar arrays. So this was put into the budget of the bond when it was originally done. We do, through the program with requiring subsidies through a third party, we have those lease purchase options with our solar. So we have 9 solar arrays at 9 schools. They generate electricity. Now, we do not own the solar arrays, and so this is to purchase them. Within the contract was we lease, and so we have to buy back the electricity that it generates at a lower amount, so around 7 cents a kilowatt hour instead of, say, 12.5 cents. So we save money, so we're really saving the delta there. But once we get to about year 8 and 9 of those programs, we're able to have a purchase. We are able to buy them out. That is, they've received the subsidies, they've done the depreciation against all the equipment, pretty much maximized everything they can get out of it, and so then they offer those to us. We do have the money within the bond program to purchase those. If we purchase those, then we own them, then we don't lease the energy. So we're not paying 7 cents a kilowatt, we just own it. Whatever it generates, we get free and clear and would be a savings to our M&O budget. So that is a positive. The only reason I'm pointing it out here as part of our conversation is honestly, the contract does not require us to purchase it. It just provides an opportunity to purchase it at that time. And so we could say we have other bond items that are more important, and we'll just let it keep going.
Mr. Hicks, for the savings, how many years would it take to get back, instead of spending the $4 million? If we
From
did
the
not.
M&O savings, that was the same question the bond committee, or budget team asked. I have not calculated that in that sense. And so that is one, but the reality, the difficulty in that is bond monies, this will have an M&O savings, so 2 different funds. Using this funds will have 100% impact in savings. So if that's, say, saving $300,000 a year, that's $300,000 a year. The offset is we would have to maintain them. We would then own them. Right now, we don't own them. They maintain them. If there's a crack, if it's not producing the energy, they have to send a contractor out to upgrade them to do that. So I think I've received 5 questions from the budget team to make a better decision or comment. They would just make a recommendation of looking at it. And this is something we could relook at every year because we don't have to make a decision until those years. But it would be nice to start the planning to get a sense out in front of it if that is the direction we're going to go or if we're going to go a different direction. But good question on I will share that with the board when I get some of those answers. Now, sorry, going back, I actually did have it in the right order, and I just, in my paper, it was the wrong order. So one of the questions, so here is, just to go over, and John is, Mr. Gay is at the table, just in case we have further questions. So one of the things working with the IT department is, hey, you got $9 million, and we actually do it every year, but he's now down to his final 9, and for this presentation, I said, hey, how is our plans for how we're going to spend this? And so this is in general just looking at the final $9.1 million, how does that break out? And you could see the computer lab replacements, the projector replacements, printer replacements, more WAPs, devices, device replacement, cabling, and then infrastructure. And so you have about 9.1. There's in general, because I'm reading exactly what he told me, if you want details, he will have to explain the details and then also how that would tie into yesterday. So I've asked him to be here if you have any of those questions, which I think.
No, but I want to go back to the previous question. When you were talking about solar panels.
I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry, my brain is working just a little slow right now. I would just request that when you do your analysis of whether or not the lease or buying option is correct, to factor in the lifespan of those. I think actually they last practically forever, but that should be something we consider, and whether or not there will be expenses for any kind of maintenance, repair of that equipment.
Members of the board, I know I've asked a couple times when it was first put in, was the lifespan? A lot of people are saying these are so new, you better wait a few years before we find out some more. So I would definitely agree with that. Because at first they said, oh, they'll be perfect for 20 years. I said, well, nothing seems to be perfect 20 years after you buy it. So what is is there some kind of denigration or losing some level of efficiency or effectiveness, or do you just replace the solar diodes or something? I'm making up words now, I'm sorry. I should have said a solar diode. I don't even know what a solar diode is.
Thingamajiggies, right, okay.
But I agree, but I think that is something that will be more clear down the road. Not a lot of people knew up front.
We'll let your smart people do their analysis, and then it should be easy, right? I mean, then we should be able to say, oh, it's more cost effective to do A or B.
Yes.
So, appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. All right. So back to IT. So I think Member Martinez had, or was going on a question. I don't know if you.
No, I just wanted to see,
How it-
yes, because it was brought up yesterday of the van set, so.
So let me frame what we heard yesterday, okay? So what we heard yesterday was, wow, what a great place Peoria is. Exemplar in being student-centered, exemplar, whatever is beyond exemplar in being welcoming and prepared. We were that. We are that. About capacity to do what's necessary. And what we heard, and we'll get the final report, so we just have my copy of the slides there, but it will be in depth, but also in my exit interview with them. What we heard is, within 2 years, we need to be clear about where we're going regarding technology. And maybe something we hadn't said in this room before, or at least I hadn't said in this room before, is we need to have an eye towards equity as we do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so equity and clarity of purpose moving forward. And I would share my perspective that ratifies or affirms the direction that we've been pointed, to say we need to know more about these things, we need to come together with a plan to do that. What's happening right now, I think maybe one thing that we heard differently yesterday than what I have been saying is, I've been trying to push that plan a little bit out to when we come together to make that, so that the ideas would be bigger when they came to the table. I think perhaps what we heard, and we'll get in the detail, that perhaps you need to consider going a little bit faster on making that plan. These things were planned before that. Okay, these are the things underneath. I believe they were speaking about devices, but they were also speaking about what software and what training do our teachers have, and what are our expectations on how that goes, and how clear are we on how we should be using instructional technology. And right now we are all over the map, which is not unexpected as we begin a new journey. And so I would, regardless of yesterday, I would still caution, don't make a plan too soon when you don't have all the information yet, much like the information on the solar there. And so as we're gathering, that's the process we are. I went way too long on that. These pieces we're online to do. Mr. Gay can explain exactly any further what they're there, but you can see devices, and John, perhaps like a ballpark kind of a number, you anticipate rolling out how many student devices this spring? Additional.
Right. Well, I can actually give you more than a ballpark, better than a ballpark. We're little perspective first. When we, and this won't be a long story, but when we started the, well, really before the current bond program started. Now, that's a little bit before my time here, but not too much longer. The plan then, there was a lot of uncertainty about where we were going to go with all this, and the plan then was simply to replace what was already there, which was basically desktop computers and labs. And so a year or two into that, and by that time I've arrived, and we've all quickly decided that that's not the path we need to be on. We need to be on putting mobile technology in the hands of every one of our students to the extent we can with the bond money. So we started that project pretty quickly. So we are doing 2 waves of replacements this semester. We did some last semester and the semester before that in terms of students. Thus far, we've deployed a little over 8,000 devices in about, I don't know, 6-8 months' time, 10 months' time. And then we're going to be deploying another, let me see, I can add it up real quick in my head here, another almost 4,000 devices this semester. At the same time, or just prior to starting the student rollout, in order for our teachers to be able to model that kind of work and process, we deployed mobile devices to our teachers as well, about 2,200 devices there. So in about a year and a half's time, we'll have deployed about 16,000 mobile devices, all geared toward getting, ultimately, dedicated sets of devices in classrooms. So one of the things that the advanced ed people noticed was that, well, in some cases it took 10 minutes to get the devices out of the cart and doing all that kind of thing. Well, the idea is to have the devices in the room where they don't have to be rolled in from the adjacent classroom or anything like that. We're going to make tremendous progress toward that goal this year. We, in fact, are going to have storage and charging devices in every single grades 3 through 8, at least, elementary classroom, with enough devices to get to about 2 to 1, 2 students to 1. We want to be 1 to 1, but a few years ago we were, 1 billion to 0. And so we've made a tremendous amount of progress with that. And there's that $3.3 million there, that's the amount of money we feel we can devote to that. Actually, we've already spent some of that since we put these numbers together, and we'll be rolling the rest of that out soon. But we also have been able to put a little bit of money aside. Given that the last bond didn't succeed, we decided to put a little bit of money aside so that we can stretch out when we're going to be buying devices, so that we don't have this enormous pile at once, they all start failing at once, and then we have no money to replace them. And so we'll be able to do a lot of that. And I should point out too, and again, I could talk all day, I'm just like Ken, but I'll try to avoid doing that. But when we started the bond, we were way behind in technology. However, we did have a wonderful asset, and that was a new fiber network. And I can tell you from not only working in other districts, but doing consulting work around the country, almost nobody has that. I mean, that is such a gift to have that kind of, and it's not just what we have today, but we have all kinds of extra capacity in there. All we have to do is buy faster equipment and so forth, and we can get more network capacity as we grow the size of that. So we started with that, and then we've built all this up since then. And so a lot of these expenses look like, oh my gosh, what could you possibly spend? How could you spend, you know, $350,000 on wireless access devices? Well, back when we started this, there was no wireless in the district at all. And so we now have wireless everywhere. And so that's something I think we can be real proud of, that we offer that to our students. And by the way, I should point out that every day we have well over 8,000 personal devices connected to our network at a time. And that's a lot of students and some staff as well. So I think that what you heard yesterday was exactly what Dr. Stifler said. It's more about how do we pedagogically want to use these devices, and therefore do we need to make some adjustments in our plans to support the best pedagogy in the classroom.
That was one of my questions, is how, if we immediately launched a bring your own device plan, how much of that, if any of it, could be deferred or saved?
Where you look up there and you see the ES and HS student mobile devices, that $3.3 million, a portion of that could be done.
Okay.
A portion of that could be done. If, that's a very difficult thing to project.
Quantify, right,
To
I understand.
quantify, but everything else you need.
And Mrs. Connect, I might want to add to that and say that the challenge with that, even though we want our students to be able to use their devices, in fact, one of the first things we did when I arrived was removed all the barriers for doing that. The challenge in terms of requiring or making it necessary for them to have devices is one of equity.
Understood.
And so that's where it gets a little bit, you know, like, okay, how much would we really save? How many students can really bring a device that's technically competitive, if you will, with other devices that students are using? So we don't want a student to be disadvantaged or feel terrible because all they have is a, 8-year-old device that hardly works at all.
True, but if we could assume that half the kids would have a compatible device, then we would only maybe have to buy half as many. I'm just thinking out
Well,
loud.
when we get all the way through this, as John said, we're at 2 to 1. Right? So if half the kids could, then that would be 1 to 1, and we
Right.
would have had to spend.
Right.
But what's not here is, and John and I had a conversation about this earlier today, that's 2 to 1 in grades 3 through 8.
Correct.
There are opportunities that we just simply can't miss in kinder and first and second grade about using new tools to teach kids to read more effectively that aren't represented in the current way we represent that. Now, principals are able and teachers are able to redeploy equipment in their schools, but how we report that currently is in the 3 to 8. So,
Okay, here's an off-the-wall question. That extra capacity in our fiber optic system?
Right.
Is that a sellable commodity?
That's an interesting question, too. Thank you, Mrs. Connect. That's technically, yes, and in, some municipalities do that. For example, a city might pay to have a big network put in place and then lease capacity to the school district. Now, it might be the opposite in this particular case. What makes the capacity available and work is all the equipment that gets that terminates all the fiber. So someone else would have to pay for that. Or if we wanted to make a business out of it, so to speak, we would have to pay for that and then figure out some way to make that a profitable venture for us. It's the only reason I hesitate at all is I've seen this before, and districts can get into a bit of a bind supporting something that somebody else is using. So what that means is you take our staff.
Right, and it's not in our mission. I get it.
Right,
You're
right,
It's not
right.
in our mission.
Yeah.
But boy, money sure would be nice about now.
Truly said.
You guys,
So-
go ahead.
Good, sorry, I have a quick question. Looking at these line items, a lot of them refer to hardware, and more specifically, I'm looking at the network cabling upgrades. And I'm certain you probably already thought of this. I mean, with technology going the way it is, more cloud-based type systems, infrastructure, very robust, secure, just wondering if there's any considerations as we move forward to, very efficient as well, from a budgetary standpoint. Are we, looking into, more cloud-based technology,
Well,
Go
thank you, Mr. Sandoval. You want me to answer that, boss?
let me try, and
Okay.
then you fix it. This is one important source of funding for what we're doing.
Yeah.
There are other important sources of funding for what we're doing, including E-rate. which is a government program that we do. So you're not seeing, for instance, you don't see any servers up there.
Yeah.
Right? You don't see any of those kinds of things. Of course, we have those.
Right.
Right? And of course, we're in the process of migrating the things that are appropriate to the cloud and the things that aren't appropriate to keep on site. The other thing that's not represented up there is the training necessary or the software that the teachers use, right? None of that is within this. And so other budget dollars have to, either we need to go out and find money through grants, or I guess people could give those things to us, or we have to repurpose current dollars in order to make those things happen. But as we know better, we do better.
Sure.
As we know better, we do better. So where you see those cabling kinds of things, lots of time, well, that's the backbone cabling, and that's big time. But we also do other kinds of things where principals in schools said, well, this is where we kind of want our lab. Well, that's not where we want our lab anymore. Those are kind of expensive changes to put into place.
Sure.
As we're working through those. I'm not sure I exactly answered your question. We are moving to the cloud. Our email is on the way right now. We do our banking basically with the State Department of Education in the cloud, although they're concerned they're not going to be able to continue that, but we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. Many of those pieces are. Many of those pieces are. John, fix what I said, please.
Oh, no, that was well said. But I will emphasize that we are, in almost every case of any software, significant software that we've licensed since I've been here, it's almost all of it, with the exception of the student information system and our vision software, is cloud-based.
Good.
And so we're definitely moving that direction. We always are careful about that for all the obvious reasons. The other funding sort of trickiness associated with that is a lot of cloud services are now really subscription-based, and you end up paying for that out of M&O. And so that becomes, if we can buy something with bond because we have the dollars, but we don't have the M&O to get the service in the cloud, that can often enter into the decision. But as Dr. Stifler pointed out, we're moving not only our email into the cloud, but all of the, I'll call it collaboration, workspace software that our students will be using is all cloud-based as well.
Gotcha. Good. Thank you.
Members of the board, let me also add, so John touched at it right at the end. There are certain pieces of software that are illegal to spend out of bond money, so only some you can. So this is only our bond, so it does not represent everything. John does receive a regular capital allocation. It's been cut way down, so I think it's down to $400,000 or $500,000. That's where he'll buy the other parts of those. And then he is also correct, once they become subscription services, they no longer meet the definition of capital and have to be spent out of M&O, which then he either absorbs into his M&O budget or he makes a request to increase his M&O budget in that sense. And so they are happening. The other, I know we talked really briefly about it. It is important just to state, prior to the bond, there was no funds going to capital. So he has no additional funds besides the bond for devices for any hardware. So that means when the bond is dead, when the bond is gone.
Expired, yeah.
Expired.
Yeah.
There are no additional funds for any device replacement. And so traditionally, and things probably could change, but I know historically, you normally have 5-year replacement cycles with a lot of these devices. So some of these that were bought in 2013 are going to be coming up. But now we've through the recession and the issues we've had with funding, we stretched those into about 7 years a normal, but you can see that 7-year will be coming up, and if something isn't done, we're probably relying on them, and they're probably so essential, we'll have to start making M&O cuts, so we'll have to start cutting people for technology in that sense. So our biggest issue right here, I would say, and you hear me say it all the time, is capital, because we do not have a capital contingency plan to help with. And in this case, it's the IT side, but we also don't have for anything. With us only receiving $2 million a year in the capital instead of the $17 million a year, it has put a huge strain on our capital side.
Sorry, kids, you can have a computer or a teacher, but not both.
I have some more questions while we're talking about what we can't afford.
Yes, ma'am.
Where would musical instruments fit into this?
Members of the board, that is normally just paid out of regular capital allocation, so it was not identified in the bond, and so they're not receiving the bond.
In the
fund for musical.
2012 bond, it was not identified. In the
It
failed
was.
bond, it was in the failed bond.
Yes.
We can only spend the money on what the taxpayers have approved. So
Right.
there was no ask in the 2012 bond for musical instruments. There was an ask in the failed bond for musical instruments. So we had a plan to do that.
Athletic equipment and facilities?
Not in there.
Nothing. And I know that in the bond that failed, we had upgrades to performing arts centers.
Now, that's a little bit different in the sense that, no, there is no money now. You could use some of the facility money because it's facilities. The difficulty is that you have to say no. The problem is that we have some performing arts centers that are in dire need, that need some. Now, they will not receive a full $3 million upgrade that was planned in the bond, but we are looking and going through some of our performing arts centers and seeing how bad they are, and we will have to prioritize those that are really bad and start doing some work.
I know there was a safety issue at Cactus a couple of years ago, maybe even last year. I think it was 2 years ago,
2 years ago, yes, ma'am.
where the performing arts area had to be shut down. Are we in that kind of situation in any of the schools, to your knowledge?
Members of the board, not right now, but they're getting used a lot. They're old and they need some repairs. And so actually we shut down a lot of our performing arts for about a week
Right.
in that sense because of some fire code stuff, and we had to do some replacements on some of the rigging and the fire equipment back there. Those were all taken care of, and those are all on schedules to be maintained, but nothing's being replaced and being improved. A lot of the rigging equipment and that still has a lot of issues.
Okay.
I appreciate you guys bringing up devices, a 2-to-1, very optimistic goal. With all these questions always focusing on how does it affect the child, every child 3rd through 8th grade has to take an assessment. And right now, it's digitally. I've been reported, and I've given it, it's supposed to be given 3 days. Because they're 2-to-1, if you have class size 35, some teachers are reporting that it takes a whole month to give a 3-day test because they have the rotation. How is that calculated in this scenario? Are we getting more devices for testing?
You don't, I'll take it, John. We'll be better off than we were. We will have to put, we will have carts of computers, we will have to combine them. This class will have to take the test on this day, then this class will have to do that. It would certainly be more efficient if we could all do it at the same time. We are not at a place, even with this acceleration of the schedule, we will not be at a place where we can just go through testing in 1 week and be done and move on with our lives. Testing is going to stretch out. There is no way for us to, with our current resources, to climb over that. The same devices that are used for testing are the same devices that are used for writing your paper or using the learning software for reading or for studying volcanoes, you know, to do your presentation. So the devices can be used in multiple ways. We have not been able to identify a way to go faster than this.
Thank you.
All right. Very good conversation. I had no idea we would spend that much time on just the bond. Sorry. So I'm going to try to go a little quick here, and some of this is a little bit older, so maybe you've already heard about that, but just going through the state of the state. So first, the governor did release, thank you very much, John. Sure. The governor released his budget January 13th, so he started on the 9th where he starts making all of the speeches and going around talking to various groups around the state, but on, I think it was 2 o'clock on that Friday is when the actual website releases the executive summary. The good news is that there was a focus on education. Initiatives are mainly phased in, so not doing everything all at once, but trying to do lots of things incrementally. From our governor, this should be no surprise, he maintains the structural balanced budget, which is those year-over-year revenues are greater than the year-over-year expenses in this sense, which is a good thing. So I'll just quickly go through. I try to get a few, this is from the JLBC, I try to provide just some evidence of where we are.
Sorry, what's the JLBC?
The Joint Legislative Budget Committee.
Thank you.
And so this, just looking at revenues right now, this is the sales tax, your income tax, those areas where it was in 16, where it was 17, you could see a little bit of a slowing down. So you see 3.5% growth in 16, and so far we're at 3%. The JLBC does use what's called a four-sector base, and so they look at 4 different groups of economists, some that are really optimistic, some that aren't very optimistic, kind of take an average of it. Each one have a weight to it that they look, and so you can see all the different U of A base, U of A low, I don't know the FAC and the JLBC. So they all bring them all together. You can see in 17 they're projecting 3.5% total growth, and in 18 3.9%. That same four-sector going out just a little bit more is 4.2% in 19, 4.8%. So you're roughly almost 5% growth in revenue by 2020, which seems high in that sense. To today's terms, it is not high from 20 years ago growth when we had the huge population. And you can see what they're looking at for exceeding the forecast. I do always try to just remind some of the other challenges with the budget. So this is something that was voted on a few years ago from the legislature, and that is tax credits, so the tax reduction. So they put in some corporate taxing credits and program to reduce the tax burden to entice and grow businesses in Arizona. And so you still have 3 more years of that. And so you can see there's still, within the next 3 years, you'll still see $196 million in credits being issued, which means that you'll be lower in the general fund. And just as an FYI, here are the tax credits that are also already currently in existence. So you have about $400 million in tax credits currently being taken. So within 3 years, you'll have $600 million reduction to the general fund. Now, this is one that...
I'm sorry you went so fast through that. That's important stuff.
It's just contextual to understand what is going on and how revenues are, what you give away, what isn't. This is, I think, this is one that I look at a lot. And it's so after every recession, what is the economic expansion for Arizona and how many months was it? And so the black line across, you can see it's 60 months. So you can see the average over the years has been 5 years, although a lot of them down below. And this is where a lot of times we would talk about the V. It would drop really quick and it would just bounce back really quick. And so it made like a V. There's no longer a V. It's more of a long, pronounced Nike swoosh or something going out that it takes forever. And you can see right now we're at 91 months of economic expansion. So we're already exceeding the average. And our projections in 2020 to continue, you have us now out to 132. So it'll be the longest economic expansion if this continues. So sometimes
what does this mean to Peoria?
Well, what this means is, so we're a function of the state revenues. The legislature sets our budget. And so this is really saying, are we really going to have the longest economic expansion in the history of the state, or is there potential that there's a hiccup in there? And so this is really just to give are we really going 132 months of constant economic expansion?
In other words, it could get worse.
Yeah.
There is slow growth expected over time, and there's also tax cuts already decided upon, and is there risk that it could go south?
So take one pass around. So now, in the executive summary, normally provides just a cut sheet of what the governor has proposed for education. So because it's hard to read up there, I just wanted to provide the sheet here. And so if you also, I hit a few of the highlights also. But just going down, you can see $129 million for education above the baseline. So one of the statements the governor has made is that he will increase funding to education above the baseline, so above that's required for inflation and other such, every single year that he's in, so that's another positive. But just looking at going down, so you have the $19 million for the supplemental right off the bat, the very first line. That's to resolve the 1% cap. That is There's a constitutional limit that homeowners could only pay so much in actual property taxes, a 1%. Once it exceeds that amount, historically, it had always come out of the general fund. 2 years ago, the legislature passed something to push it back to those counties to retax their people to collect the money, which when you retax the same people that were exceeding, it was deemed unconstitutional, so the judge threw it out, and so it has to come back out of the general fund. So you have $19 million off the top to cover those high tax. Those are, like down in Tucson, you have Tucson School District with their high DSEG amount and all their taxing, and it's not just schools, but when you layer on city and county and library district and water district and everybody comes on, there are places where it exceeds, and so this is to cover that cost. Below that, so you have $76 million for the baseline. The first one is for enrollment growth. So you could see that the governor is projecting 1.25% in population. So students going to public education will grow by 1.25%. And then there's another $76 million for inflation, which is projected at 1.24%. Now this is a snapshot. When the budget is actually approved, they will put in the actual calculation. So it's a I don't know if it's calculated on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or something, a national inflationary index, but they use the last 12 months whenever they go to apply. I'm only saying that because 2 months ago this said 1.38%. It's dropped down to 1.24. It could go down, it could go up. It's really based on the data and the numbers of what is showing for inflation. So you can see there's the cap issue again. So the first one was because it got kicked out on for this year. The one is the next 19 million is for next year. Higher average cost per pupil. So when you have more students going to charter schools and district, they actually get more money. It actually costs the state more money, and so they need to account for that higher average cost per pupil. And so you see the state is budgeting an extra, or the governor, an extra nearly $15 million to cover those students. Now the rest are just a lot of little things. I don't know what the college credit exam, I didn't read that paragraph, and then some small amounts going down. If I keep going down, I will just make a comment on the 19.5 million. So that's an adjustment for multi-site charter system phase down. That was last year, part of the budget negotiations was to hold charter schools harmless. They were interpreted to say, let's just say right now a basis, I'll use them example, there's probably about 16 different basis schools, all have individual CTDS number, which is a county type district school number, which is issued by ADE for each individual charter operator. They do that to get the small school weights, but really when you have 16 of them, they should not be receiving any small school weights. And I'm using BASE as an example, but it's really multiple systems have multiple charters, but they separately open them up so that they could, any site that's under 600, they get more dollars per student. This eliminates that. It says, hey, if you're basically, they're all one network. They're essentially like a district in that sense. And so they're eliminating and not allowed to receive that funding. And so this is saying that that adjustment where last year was part of the budget that they were held harmless, it's not held harmless and they're losing that funding. So this is a cut of funding in that. The
Mr.
next,
Hicks, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Which line item did you say had to do with?
19.5 million was the one I was just talking about, adjustment for multi-site
Was there another
charter.
line that you said had to do with increased funding for charters?
No.
Oh.
Oh, the 14.8 above it was the higher average cost per pupil.
Oh, okay, I see. That's what I'm remembering, because of charters, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so now keep going back down to the negative 31 million. That's an adjustment of one-time funding. So this year we were held financially harmless. So even though we implemented current year funding, there was a financial hold harmless. This is, the financial hold harmless is gone, and so there's a restriction of those declining districts. They're projecting $31 million loss of funding to those school districts. And so that essentially is because they're getting funded on last year's numbers, and they don't go to this year's numbers, they go to next year's numbers. And so it's a double hit of declining. So when you're declining 1% a year, they're catch it up both years in one hit. And so it's basically a doubling of their declining projections. The next is just a new construction property savings, so that goes away. Now keep going down. This is one We had a lot of conversation in our budget team about implementing results-based funding, so there's $37 million that the governor's identified. That is looking at the top 10% of schools in the state, and of those top 10%, if they are 60% or more free and reduced, they get $400 per student. If they are 60% or less in free and reduced rate, then they get $224 per student. So it is really looking at the top 10% of schools' achievement based on the test scores, getting additional funding.
So let me just clarify, because that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
So there's this is not an
And it's
economic
not your
idea. This is
Yeah,
a-
let's give the performing schools more money, right?
This is a political issue more than an economic issue.
Wasn't
And
too
it,
good.
No, I know. Just want to clarify.
previous governor had something called success funding. It lasted for 1 year and it went away. This is along the lines of that. There is an idea that says that let's fund the schools that are working the best and reward those who are doing well. That's what's behind that idea, to do that. I don't believe that paying that school more is going to make this school work harder, but that's the idea behind this. This also will be necessary then, not in the economic realm, but to fix or finalize what's A through F and the whole testing regimen in Arizona, which is also all over the place right now. So that's all together.
And they're
You get
just
these-
using standardized testing?
We don't have a final answer to that, Ms. Martinez, yet.
Members of the board, a lot of this, remember, the governor just puts out a plan, here's how I plan, it takes bills, legislators take that, put it into a bill form, and then you see more of the details, so that's why you don't know exactly. We could make the presumption that it's based on a standardized test or one time a year, but until you see the details, you don't know exactly for sure in that sense. All right, the next one is $20 million for enrollment reconciliation funding. So this is the governor saying, it looks like with current year funding going away and the hold harmless going away, I would like $20 million to try to bridge the gap of some of those worst systems that are declining the most and going to have the hardest hit. We would like some money to bridge that gap. And so that's $20 million to help that. So really, instead of losing 31 and adding 20, you see a net decrease of about $11 million for those declining districts. The next is the governor proposing $13 million to phase in a 2% teacher pay increase over 5 years. Sorry.
There's been a lot of press on that, Mr. Hicks. It's about $2.04 a week.
We had a lot of fun and jokes about it at our budget team meeting as well. The teachers did. But it is a reach out to try to start moving towards increasing teacher pay. $10 million to begin the all-day kindergarten early literacy funding. And so to go statewide all-day kindergarten is around $200 million. So this, I think as I read the paragraph on this, it was those schools that have a 90% free and reduced rate and higher, it will be getting all-day kindergarten. So we don't have any schools that would qualify in that sense.
That was my question, because I know we approved the override
Yeah.
to fund full-day kindergarten, so this would not, this is a moot
It's not
point.
gonna affect us.
Not going to affect us.
Thank you.
The next is the teacher bonus, $1,000 new teacher bonus in high-need schools. And so that is to provide the $1,000 per new teacher for those schools that are 60% or higher in free and reduced rate.
Are they taxing it as a bonus or as base salary?
That's not clear.
Yeah, we're not even clear exactly how it would be sent to schools, but 60% is a much lower threshold. We would have a few schools that would hit that amount, but we don't really, until you see the bill, I can't tell you too much more details about how that would be implemented, how it would be identified. Is it new to the district, new just to that school? Is everybody going to transfer in? Is it going to have, those, we don't know those answers right now.
These are the governor's ideas. However, our governor's been getting what he wants for the last 2 years, so people are paying very close attention to these ideas.
The next one is the Arizona Broadband Initiative. As you heard, we have the fiber backbone. This would not affect us one bit. Some money going to the State Board of Ed for standards, creating some completion grants for JTEDs, some school leadership training. So this is to create an academy for principals, mainly principals, to go to learn in partnership. I can't remember, I read it, but I can't remember who it was. Computer Science Initiative, Jobs, our JAG program, some small amounts. Those are a few $100,000. And then the very end, so you have the School Facilities Board, a reduction of about $16.9 million, but it's turning around and adding $17 million. So it's really keeping that the building renewal program continued at, for the probably about a 3-year period, and I'm not 100% sure on the number of years. It was operating around $16 million. Last year, he doubled it to 30. And so it was a one-time, so you could see the 16 coming off. The governor's putting it back in and say, let's keep it at 30 million instead of the lower amount in that sense. And so that's somewhat good. Now, remember, as we've alluded to earlier during our bond conversation, the School Facilities Board really does, because they have limited amount, $30, $40 million for the entire state, they really do expect things to fail before they'll replace them. And so we do have 3 programs right now, we're working with them on 3 of our sites. We have structural engineer approval, so we have POs out to a structural engineer for 3 of our sites to assess, to see if we can get some additional funding for some cracking in the foundation, cracking in the walls, that kind of stuff. And so I think we will continue with that. So as we get some systems that are very bad, we do turn those into the SFB, but we do have a schedule and a program, and our goal is not to wait until the air goes out and nobody has air at a school, in September. Our goal is to get to it before it fails. Mm-hmm. We don't replace things, that are just a few years old. We're waiting until they're in the last 4 or 5 years. But normally it's getting down to the last 2 years of their life cycle, and things that we're repairing on a constant basis we'll get out in front of. But I just didn't want anybody to think that we do not utilize the School Facilities Board. We still go there, but those systems that are in failure, that we will send over there. Okay, so hopefully that was a good general overview of where we are.
That was a very good list. If I can make just a couple comments before you move on. I listened to the governor's speech, and he did 18 points for education. It is encouraging that it's clearly a high priority on his radar screen right now. But I think it's important for our community to put these numbers in context. He's talking about $114 million, correct, for K-12? There are 1.1 million children in district schools in the state. So $114 million doesn't go that far, and I think that's illustrated by the $2.04 that teachers might get extra for a week, and these other areas as well. I will say, in case you were unaware, that the past 2 Teachers of the Year and Arizona Schools Now and ASBA, and I think some other education advocacy groups have approached the governor about maybe rethinking this list and putting any extra funds towards teacher pay.
There are several groups advocating for that.
Yes, because that is widely recognized as the most pressing need in schools in Arizona. So. Although, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying capital's not huge too, but anyway, that is out there.
Members of the board, I will tell you just from my classroom first, there was many things on this list I argued against and should be supporting other areas, but as a governor, he has to look at all the political viability and he puts together what he thinks is the best and most beneficial for his budget to be passed and to go through in that sense. So it's easy for me to say I was completely against the results-based funding. I thought that's something, if we're all adequately funded, then maybe we could talk about that, but until you get to adequate, we shouldn't really be talking about rewarding those that are doing great, since I believe a lot of it is really based on where you live, your zip code, your wealth, highly correlated. And so there's a few things in here I was completely against, but I'd be honest, I think it's a positive that it was an education focus, and
I agree.
he's moving in the right direction. I think obviously in a school system, we want him to move faster and a lot more, but he has to live with that and how to do that and live with all the promises that he's made. So, but I think it is a positive. I would say that just other legislative things, since this is the state of the state, the AOI bill continues to go through, so our
AOI stands for?
Arizona Online Instruction. And so one of the bills that has just passed, some of the subcommittee, I can't remember which one, if it's Senate or House Education, was a requirement. So this has tried to go through the last few years, but it requires school districts and charter schools to take any class that's been taken through an online school. You must take it without. Right now, we require them to test in for competency, so we know that some systems lack some quality, and so we make them take a test to verify that they are competent in what they were passed. There's a bill out there that makes it illegal for us to test for their competency, and we have to take 100% of core classes taken on other systems, 100%. And so that is a big deal. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a big deal. And ESAs continue to hear. I haven't seen a bill on it, but they continue to be pushed and continue to be talked about. That will be very key in this legislative session. ESAs are the Empowerment Scholarship Account, and so you've heard me say that's essentially the government paying parents to take their kids out of public education. Is what it is. So it's roughly saying we'll give you $5,500 to take your kid out of public education. And so it's right now in a special ed capacity and a very small first responders capacity. They would like to grow it to statewide for every student has the opportunity or every family. We can go into a deeper conversation about that, about the demographics and how that would play out and how the equity of that is not really equitable and how difficult that would be. And to be quite honest, the state can't afford it. That's more money than they pay for us for district school kids. And so if they had 200,000 kids do that, they would bankrupt the state. And I'm just guessing off the top of my head with those numbers, but I will tell you they can't afford that. Because they would have to increase that number where we showed the 14 million for higher average cost students if they really put a lot into it. And they have no controls over the system either, right? So those two areas continue to be a big concern. I will say, I shared with the budget team, I do have a meeting with Senator Lesko on Tuesday to start developing some of those relationships and working to get down there and to try to get our impact of some of the legislative bills and what's going on. So I would encourage everybody, I encourage them, anybody and everybody to work with your legislature to try to get them develop the relationship and give them the information about how it impacts us specifically. So I would encourage you guys to do that too.
It's very important that they understand that if, on the first issue you brought up, if you just have to take whatever and put, if you can't test, then these students are going to drown if they're behind. They're not going to be able to learn because they're not going to have the foundation.
They won't
So
have.
that's against our kids.
I would agree. Potentially it could even be against our results, our labels, and everything. You have to accept whatever it is. And if those kids are doomed for failure, you're going to absorb them into your system with that. Where they should be back retaking something and really learning it so they can go forward with success.
Well, and it can work the other way too. What if they're ahead? That's just, we need to know where they are before we put them in our system. That's not against anybody, that's just facts.
One thing I want to clarify, Mr. Hicks, is you talked about public education, and I know when you say that you mean school districts. But there is a lot of confusion in the broader community because charter schools get public funds and now private schools get public funds through STOs. And so for myself in my communications with constituents, I call our schools districts, school districts, because that's what we are. And what defines us, we are not the unique users of taxpayers' funds. What we have is we have locally elected, democratically run school-to-school governance, and that's really what makes us different.
Members of the board, I do try to make, so I'm sorry if I just misspoke, but public education, the ESAs is if you take your kid out of public, so if they were going to a charter or a district and take them and put them in a parochial, homeschool, private school, they will pay you $5,500. I do try, I normally say traditional public school districts versus charter schools, so I do try to,
No,
but
I know.
sometimes
It's kind of
blur
one of
'em.
my missions to help,
to clarify.
community and taxpayers understand the difference, because their money's going a lot of different places.
I would agree with that. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about where we are. And the good news is you're going to hear from somebody.
Besides you?
Besides me. Although, plenty of time. So right now, what I wanted to do is just give you a sheet. So first, on the PowerPoint, I want to just, a few of our assumptions that are important from a governing board, and I think I've already said this or try to reiterate. Knowing how many kids the budget is built on is very important. So one of the things that I think is your role is that if we were looking at a budget and we could, this is a planning document, and we could say, hey, we're going to grow by 300 kids, create a lot of extra money, give everybody big raises, the kids don't show up, we don't have the money, what happens? One of your, I don't expect governing boards to really know all the intricacies, but there are certain things you should know, and one is, how many kids is this budget built on, and is it reasonable? From what you're seeing, what you're hearing, other reports, crosshatch it, look at everything, and so this, I just want to, we're assuming the same ADM.
And what's ADM?
Our average daily membership. There is, we do get funded on a weighted student counts, what brings in Group B, but that can fluctuate. I think the number of students, those base number of kids that are in there, that ADM is very important. And so for your purposes, you need to know we're right now assuming zero change, no decrease, no increase for the revenue projections and for our budget. It becomes more important because current year fundings, we're living in that world, and so we no longer are held to a minimum funding from the prior year. That floor is gone, and we have to live with whatever our budget is next year, so it is important. The cost of Prop 206, we'll go through that. I will tell you utility cost increase, and so you're only getting the summary sheet that I've handed out, but I've shown our budget team. APS is with the Corporation Commission right now, and they have a request. Our utility rates will go up about 6% for most of our systems. SRP is kind of, I don't know if it just happened this way for this year, and so we have about 60% of our schools are APS, 40% are SRPs. We actually have a reduction of 1% in our SRP schools, and a potential 6% increase. Now, that is at the Corporation Commission. If you've read anything about that, they have a staff, DOE projections, you have others. It is all over the map. They're asking for 6%. Somebody said it should only be 2%. Somebody said nothing. Somebody said it should be cut. They got a lot to go through to try to filter through what that is.
What's the time frame for them to filter?
That is I do not know that question. Governing board members, I will write down that. They've been hearing it. Tim Hogan is the representative for school districts. They're required to have somebody. He does testify at times and go through that. We get updates. I do not know the time frame. My guess, since they're asking for it by July 1, is it has to happen before July 1. And maybe historically it goes a little cleaner that it's going right now. And so I think that with the challenges and the confusing, it's creating some issues in there. But that could be about a $200,000 increase to us year over year. Benefit changes. Now, there will be benefit changes, but we did have our first review with our Valley Schools consultants and looking at it, and we will have no cost increase. So there'll be no cost increase, but we are looking at some minor plan changes just to come into alignment of the norm and where we are, and so we're not going too rich or we're not going too poor, so we'll be adding and subtracting. So there's little tweaks here and there. So I would say that there's some changes, but there's no cost. That is a big deal. As we started off this year, looking at our claims, we had 3 months that were indicating that we would be having an increase. Something happened in October, November, December, and everything turned around, and I don't know if everybody listened to me crying and they stopped going to the doctor and they just said, hey, I'll just be sick for Mr. Hicks, that'll be great. But our costs went way down, and so it helped with our projections, and it really brought us back, because I think I was saying that I don't know how we wouldn't get away with at least a 2% increase and such. A 5% increase would have been $1 million cost, so I was really worried there was no cost increase. So that is a positive. We do look at other programmatic changes, and so looking at this sheet that you're looking at, we do the revenue projections up top. We'll look at those, make sure they understand the assumption. You can see at the very top middle, you have ADM change equals 0, so that our budget team understands how much money that converts to. So you can see a total revenue increase year over year. We're looking at $2.1 million. And then we have tabs within this spreadsheet to go and start looking at what's our benefits. State retirement's going up 0.02%. So that's a $27,000 increase.
So can you clarify that, please? When you say what's going up, are the teachers or the staff increasing? Is the district putting in more, company
For the
match?
members, so for the benefits, the state retirement?
Yes.
That is, the Arizona State Retirement System is a required deduction that we take from employees and the district has to match. And so with that funds the pension. So it's both sides of it. So it's all employees. So anybody 20 hours a week for 20 weeks, we're required to assess that. So we take it away from them, and then the district has to match it. It's like FICA, OSI.
I was just going to
in that
ask,
sense.
what is the rate that the staff has to put in?
Everybody pays the same, and right now it's at 11.47.
And what is this district's responsibility?
11.47.
So it's equal, okay.
It's 50-50 split.
And we have a vesting schedule of 10 years?
You're vested at 5 years, and then, but only at about 50%, I believe it is, and then it goes up 10% a year until 10 years you're fully vested.
Thank you.
It is the calculation of it going up is in statute, and so it is formula driven. So they do since you know a little bit more, they do an 8-year smoothing average. So you take each year as 1/8. So bad years don't have a full impact that you would see an increase, but good years don't have a full decrease in that sense. And so that's why I call it the smoothing effect, and so that's what you're also seeing here. We're not 100% fully funded in the state retirement system, but because of the formula, they would have to override the formula to become 100%. Unless you have 8 years of a perfectly funded, it's not going to be that way. It's always going to go up or down in that sense.
I do want to say I appreciate you guys sent out a letter that you're going to have a training for your staff about ASRS. And so I'd hope that our teachers know that there is a vesting schedule. So I do appreciate that.
I hope so too. The ASRS, the Arizona State Retirement System, is one of the better retirement systems in the country.
Yes, it is.
It may not be fully vested, but it depends on, I guess, on what your criteria, but it is in better shape than nearly anything else going. And so for each of our employees, 23% of their salary, total salary, is going towards their retirement. It's a big deal.
And no matter what age, everybody should be attending those meetings. So thank you.
I agree.
Just to prolong the meeting, sorry. In 2001, that amount was 2%.
Yep.
So it has gone up steep from that, and that is part recession, part losing money. They were highly into equities. They kind of have a more balanced approach to kind of minimize some of that. But their assumption is an 8% return a year. So if they do not get 8%, it's a loss, and it filters into we have to increase the rates of everybody to help cover that loss, 1/8 of that sense. So some years they have good, some years bad. So as we continue to look, the certified and classified are really, this is our staffing formula to show where we're at. So starting with Wendy Davey and her department, worked for a while, and then I think in end of November-ish, oh, we lost her. Around November, she'll give us the projections. Us, really, although I'm CC'd on it, it goes to Steve and Bob, and I think Mr. Panzer, and them with a team go through which they have really rolled forward, added in students, were projections, looking at birth rates and such, to give us the most accurate what they think is bare minimum that will be funded, that we'll have next year. And I say bare minimum because they do give us an actual, but we staff a little below that. So we do take off a couple hundred kids for the staffing sake of it, because once you've hired the staff, you can't really go the other way. What we could do is if we hire too many staff and we're over budget, we could reduce everybody's pay proportionately, but we're not have the ability just to fire a teacher, walk in and say, we don't have money, you're gone. We would proportionally give everybody, say, 0.5% less, because that we don't want to be in that position. We'd rather be in a position that we know minimum and then begin to hire. Once the enrollments come in higher, we start, I call it tripping, where they meet and exceed a class size requirement guideline. Then we will approve teachers, additional teachers in that sense.
For the classified? Go ahead.
I thought Judy was going to say something, I'm sorry.
For the classified, it looks like we're negative. Well, with the new law passing $10 an hour, are we not experiencing?
That's a little bit down. So members of the board, if you follow down on the tabs, you can see a Prop 206 cost. And so this is the classified staffing. That is our standards based on our enrollment. So special ed, what we have going on there. So we have a reduction of some of those staff in our special ed, our one-to-ones or our resource. And then also, because where the numbers played out and when we roll it forward, we have front office staffing standards. This reduces a half-time FTE at 3 of our sites. And so that is why those are going down. If you go down a little farther, you can see Prop 206 is a positive 794, so the cost is nearly $800,000. Now that is 1.5 years, so this is recommending, so we did an increase this January 1st. We didn't, it wasn't part of the budget process last year, so I'm catching up in 6 months, even though we already paid for it, and we'll lose our carry forward. We'll go down a little bit for that. This is us catching that up, and so this is 1.5 years worth of the cost is about $800,000. And so that's on a separate line just because that's a whole unique situation. The other staffing, there's nothing there, but we do, as part of the budget team, we go through that process and identify if there is positive and negatives. Department changes, that $400,000. Now, we did set aside and put in K-12 8 additional certified teachers because we staffed at below what the ADM is and what we think at a guaranteed amount. We put the 8 teachers into contingency so that when they're approved, we don't have to verify, do we have the budget? We already have the budget for 8 certified staff right off the bat. And so it just goes through the process, looking at the enrollment, double checking, and then just approving at that point. And so that's essentially the $400,000 is that. The other is the $200,000 for the increase in our utilities that I already talked about. So that is the process. So you just got a summary right there. I will tell you it's already out of date. So this was from a couple weeks ago when we put the agenda together. We met this Tuesday and updated it. And so some expenses have already gone up. We're looking for, and we're already talking through a process to look for identifying additional ways to either increase revenues or decrease expenses. And so, for example, participation fees, somebody brought up, maybe we should look at changing our participation fees. So we're going to start talking about that, looking at staff. Do we need 12-month staff? I think I heard that at the board retreat. Somebody mentioned that. So I identified that. And so we're looking at those 12-month staffers at schools. Do we need all those 12-month staffers at schools? And can we cut and reduce some of their calendars to have some savings?
So a couple questions on the expense category. What I don't see is, so this is kind of a twofold question, same subject, but we contract our maintenance, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, I mean, certainly the Prop 206 is going to affect their staff, et cetera. How does that play into this?
Members of the board, that's a great question. That's part of the 794 is their increase.
Okay.
Is
Gotcha.
in there. So, but you also made a good point. It would be under other or department changes, but it hasn't come up. If we wanted to make any changes to our custodial program, and it's been a challenge. If you walked and talked, some sites are doing fine, some that aren't staffed, and so we have challenges. This would be where we identify, and we've done little, what I would call incremental, to try to address, to make it a little bit better. And some of it has, but this would be where we address that.
Gotcha.
So you could see, so yes, it's not implied, but there is an increase of the Prop 206 as part of that.
Okay.
But then also, if we wanted to go above and beyond just a Prop 206 increase and look at something else, we would identify it. It has not been identified right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
We did have, so we're right now through generating ideas. We've had people bring up maintenance issues, turnaround times, where we're at. We've had people bring up instructional coaches. So we're going through the process right now as people are identifying areas that they either want to look at, verify the funding, or question. Part of the budget team's process will be to listen to every single one of those and address it. Sometimes we'll bring in other people that might have another plan, and so our superintendent might make an appearance in 2 meetings to kind of align with some where he's going. If there were other things that come up, much like board priorities, if you'd say, hey, we really need to do X, Y, or Z, I'm going to capture that and bring it and put it on for our budget team to start discussing and look how we can incorporate it. If you go all the way down to the very bottom, you can see where it says a 1% increase to all staff is 1.5. That's salary and benefit cost. This is just a personal opinion. Anything can happen. I'm not a voting member of our budget team, so I facilitate it, try to lead it. But I kind of think, if we, right now that's a 0.7, maybe we're at a 0.6. To me, that's not really a raise. If you don't get to 1%, it's really not a raise in that sense. And so really what you're seeing is the very beginning stages of identifying all those areas, those ups and downs we have. And right now on this sheet, at 1.2, you're only looking at a 0.75 raise. I will tell you, costs have increased already, and so it's down to about $1 million. And so we're still looking for areas that can either increase revenues or decrease expenses to my goal, that my personal goal, each member could be different, and the superintendent or you could be different, is to get to at least 1.5 so we can give at least a 1% raise, which is difficult with the Prop 206 and the utility rate increases on it.
So my next question in the expense category, the benefits, the health benefits, and it's great that, it's, because it's, we're not winning or losing, I guess, it's flat. But that said, there's no doubt health benefits of, they're expensive, without question. But when we take a look at, our teachers and staff, and their benefits and, their deductibles and their premiums, et cetera, what's the average, I guess, deductible that, our teachers are on from a health benefit perspective?
Wow, that's a very detailed, good question, members of the board. I thought you were going to go with how much do we pay, what's their average
Well, and
deductible?
I guess it'll kind of go into that, because I'm assuming, and it's great that we're saving money, but, is it at the expense of, our teachers and staff paying more?
How many plans do we have? Like the high deductible, the traditional?
That's
We
what
can
answers
start
the
there.
question.
We have 3 different
3.
plans.
Okay.
So we have a PPO, high deductible health plan, so HDHP, and then an HDHP buy-up. So one has a deductible of $2,600, one $1,300. I do not know the PPO off the top of my head, but it's a traditional PPO
I believe 80/20.
plan in essence. So we have 3 of those.
All of the plans are less generous than plans were once upon a time.
Sure.
But as far as, so that they're not what we want to be, but they are competitive with our peers. And as a matter of fact, we're in partnership with our peers, and so they're offering the same plans. That's the benefit of being in a trust like that. But what's the impact of our employees? And there are some things, that we meet, we hear about the cost of insurance, and that's when Ken says those pieces are moving. We can get all of that information. It's a ton of information.
Sure.
But in those broad sectors, those are the numbers that Ken said. So we have those 3 different choices for employees.
Gotcha.
Last year in December, you guys talked about switching over to a 501(c) in hopes of getting more school districts in. This trust is going to proceed spreading out that risk and decreasing those costs to our employees?
Members of the board, it could. That could definitely be. Really what I see that if the Valley Schools continues to grow, I think there's around 22. It's already grown 2 this year. So I think there are around 22 school districts that are part of it. If that continues to grow, what I really see that doing is providing additional purchasing power and savings that keep the fixed expense at the same cost instead of it growing. So it's at around $56 per employee per month that we pay for stop-loss programs and to manage the program. I really see those savings providing to make sure that stays at 56, because there's always constant pressure for the cost to go up on that side too. I think we would benefit, so that would be the actual cost. We would benefit if we continue to grow in the actual network, then when we negotiate, when Valley Schools negotiates with, say, UHC, Blue Cross, right now we're at UHC, but when they go to negotiate with them, they can say, hey, we have 40,000 members now, we're at 45 next year, or 50,000. It's the largest pool in the state, and it carries some power in that sense.
I'm
And
glad
so
you brought that up,
negotiating
because
power.
if we have Valley Trust as one option, ASBA is another,
ASBA.
and the state, do we choose Valley Trust because they have the lowest premiums for, how do we choose them?
That's a great question. That was historically done, so prior to probably 2010.
Let's
Anybody
answer
around
it
that could
this
help
way.
me?
We created Desert Valley, okay? Peoria, Deer Valley, and Paradise Valley created that and has grown since then. And the business decision every year has been, it has been in our best interest to stay in that. The risk assessment that you asked about goes something like this, because it's in some ways, this is not technical, we're a super member, right? Because we're a founding member and there's different rights. That's where the extra liability potentially lies. Okay, so as it spreads out and it becomes its own 501(c), there's no such thing as a super member anymore, so our exposure becomes less. What benefit does that have on our employees? Well, nothing, unless something was to go south, and then the whole district is protected. So they're
So
kind
we
of two
stay with
different
Valley
things.
Trust just, and correct me if I'm wrong, just as a loyalty because we found it, not because it may not be?
Let me
No.
just correct one thing. So we founded the Valley Schools Insurance Trust, which is our property casualty and liability, which
Okay.
Right.
included workers' comp. We were not one of the original ones for the employee benefit trust. We came in after. We had our own trust going in that sense. And so we chose to join them at that time. Right now, we cannot join the state, even though the laws allow it. They have not set up the structure, so we can't join the state or create part of their trust. We could join ASBATE. ASBATE does not have a fully insured program. A self-insured program. They have a fully insured program. So, for example, we're having 3 good years where we've saved $10 million. Right now, that stays in our account. If we were with ASBATE, we would not have any of that money. They would have made that money. Fully insured means if you have a good year, they make the money. Self-insured means you have a good year, you keep the money.
So almost like they're for a profit and we're switching to.
No, they're a nonprofit also
I
in
see.
that sense.
Okay.
It's really the type of mechanism. Self-insured means we pay directly the claim. So if you break your leg and it costs 10 grand, we pay 10 grand. And that affects our claims going forward and our negotiated price. And we negotiate with networks to see how much we pay for everything. When you get fully insured, you pay $300 a month and it doesn't matter what anything is, and you see what the rates are at the end, and did they make money or lose money, and if they're within 85%, they'll keep the rates the same. If they're not, it's going to go up. And so they're 2 different models, and I will tell you, once you're any district that probably has 1,000 employees or more, if you're not self-insured, you lose money. You give away all your good years, and you will end up paying more in the long run every single time.
There are other options. Those are the 2 biggest options in the state. There are, in my previous district, we went in with the city and 2 other school districts and a college to create our own trust that nobody in Maricopa County would care about, right? So we had that, right? There are school districts that are their own entity all by themselves, and they're self-insured, self-funded. There are school districts that just simply go to the private sector and buy Blue Cross for their employees. There are school districts that partner with a hospital system in order to do that and build their own kind of thing. There are many ways to do it, and all of them are fabulously expensive.
Thank you so much.
No, great questions. Any other questions?
So just
Okay.
one final comment on that. Is it a best practice of ours to, whether going out to bid or just assessing, the health benefits of the programs that we're on for our employees, our associates, to ensure that we always have their best interests, right?
Correct.
Top of
Yeah.
mind.
Members of the board, I will tell you, we look at the claims, we look at everything on a regular basis. We're self-insured, so really the only cost, we pay for that network cost. We get reports every year that looks at our network compared to others, so how much are you paying per doctor visit on wholesale, discounted price, and others to verify that UHC is a good network that we're buying in, and we get one of the best rates in the entire state because of our size. But the fixed cost is really where you're looking at, and we look at that every year. It hasn't gone up in 4 years. So the stop loss, where we're at, we do assess that on a regular basis to make sure we're in a good, healthy program in that sense.
But it's not a loyalty issue. It's a business decision
Sure.
every year. And so when it's not in our best interest, at least while I'm here, we'll leave. If there's somewhere more beneficial to us, that does not appear to be the case right now. Of course, everything's about to change regarding insurance
Right.
again.
Agreed.
Right.
But members of the board, I would say a self-insured product, no matter where we go, is where we would be, because although we've had some bad years, and that was about 5 years ago when we had to pony up, we had all of our retirees were part of our health plan. The board at that time said, no, you have to use Arizona State Retirement. They have a health insurance program, pushed them all off of our plan. When you have retirees, you could probably guess that they probably use the plan a little bit more than people that are working. Prior to May, I'd only been to the doctor once in like 5 or 6 years, and so a lot of people like that, you're replacing retirees that are going all the time in that sense. And so when we got off of that, we have had nothing but good experience and good savings, and it's really, and it stays with us. The good stuff, the good years stay with us, and we've had 4 good years.
4 good years, and across those 4 good years, how's the premiums and deductibles adapted for these teachers and staff?
The deductibles in our high deductible plan had to go up because of the law changed, and so we did have to make some adjustments, and I think we've made a few other minor adjustments of some, we made some major on the pharmaceutical, but for the program, the medical health, we've had other minor tweaks, PPO here or there, and really it's trying to make sure that one plan isn't much richer than the other, and everybody runs over that, and it costs us more money. You try to keep them somewhat balanced in a sense.
May we get a copy of what our staff is offered?
We can do that easily. We can also give you the links to the website so you can surf all the different combinations, because when we print it out, it's kind of big.
But I like what Mr. Sandoval is, I think where you're going with this is the decision-making needs to be on 2 levels. One, what's in the best interest of the district as a whole financially, and then the other one is how is it affecting the
Right.
individual lives of our teachers and staff.
Thank you.
My previous district, as I left, we had 11% raise in rates the year I left. We had a 7% raise in rates the year before we left. It was simply on so you try and give a 1% raise, but there's no reserves in order to do that. And so employees all go. Where we are is much better than where most of the state is currently. Would that all change? It could. It could. And the evidence of that, beyond me just saying that, in a large scale is you can see that people are seeking to join the trust that we're in. And Ken's answers are very much more technical than mine, but I would describe that we are saying the same thing. I'm just describing in a much broader sense. I don't think that anything he said to what I said is in conflict,
Right.
but that's how that goes.
Members of the board, so that is I just wanted to go through our budget summary where we are at this point, which it's already changed now, so we got you to just a good understanding, because I know we're a little long, so if I could just go to the next. So one of them was so you heard a little bit about what we're talking about, was to hear what are your priorities. So you also heard what a personal priority is my own. You heard some of the challenges we're having at the budget team and where we're going, but really to talk about the governing board priorities. I could go on if I want, or let you guys talk right now.
You seem to be having a lot of fun. All right.
Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, so.
Teacher recruitment and retention would be one. And of course, the two areas of priority that was brought up by Advance Ed. I think we need to address those, see how they fit into the budget.
I understand that increased salary is really difficult, but looking at alternatives, things that can last our staff longer periods of time, paying for their materials. We are already doing the paying for the testing for their certification. Science, last I heard, it was brought to my attention, we only have 8 or 9 teachers that fall under that area, but they're hard to fill positions. That would be a great investment to our district, and it's such a minimal cost.
I'm sorry, I'm seeking clarification. So the testing piece, I got that.
Yes, but
And
the
we have
materials-
mechanisms to do that. We are using federal monies to do that, which weren't represented there. Did you say something on top of that that I missed?
The materials for the testing,
That we are doing that
Okay.
as well.
all right, so any way we can help support our teachers that need the extra licensing, the materials, if we can't pay them long-term, we can at least give them their certification that will last them a long time.
We have room within the Title II budgets to do some of
Yeah.
that.
The other piece of information is fingerprinting. So I know it's a cost, it's not a consistent cost. That's something we could pass out over a period of time. Not all teachers need that fingerprinting. I believe it's $60. It's a short cost for a long period, for a great investment return.
Just for clarification, are you saying not to require it, or?
No, to pay for their.
Oh, for us to pay for the.
That would be
to
a
the-
dramatic change in practice. General practice for a school district is that the professional coming to the organization has to have the credential coming to that. If we ask somebody to change, then we would help them do that, and that fingerprinting would do that.
So maybe a renewal, I know that in private practice, they state that if they're gonna pay for a cost, then you owe me a year of your service. And if you don't meet that 1 year of service, then you return the fees that paid for your fingerprinting card.
I think I understand the direction, at least, of what you're suggesting, to look at some kinds of long-term agreements to do that, and so we'd pay upfront an agreement to guarantee somebody staying. We can certainly explore that. We can explore that.
Yeah, we do it for our health benefits, so.
Any other priorities?
I think if we could take a look at, with the bond not passing, there's no doubt, there's a potential of some of our class sizes, getting a little larger. I think looking at support services, wraparound services for the classrooms, the ability, because we know a lot more today than we did in the past around varied learning barriers and how students prefer to learn, and having, liaisons, if you will, individuals where they're focused on, whether it be clothing or lunch boxes or, behavioral, type of partnerships as well. But kind of some of those wraparound services, even prevention type services, right? Substance abuse, et cetera. There's some of those other support services. When we talk about educating the entire child, social emotional learning, taking a look at what we might be able to, if that's deemed as an opportunity, one that we can take a hard look at.
Members of the board, I will say, part of special ed's budget when they submitted it was an increase of 2.5 in behavior positions, behavior intervention specialist or behavior
interventionist
and board certified behavior. So there is some increase in that sense. So I think that is, now that's not everything, and I will tell you, we did talk a little bit in our budget team about the growing need, that it continues to get worse and worse from a behavior sense, that they're not identified in either IEPs or 504s, but we're continuing to get students with greater and greater needs, and how do we service them, and they're taxing more on the teacher's time and their efforts. We didn't really have a plan to address that, but it was identified as that continues to be a growing issue.
Okay. Thank you.
One last thing. You're not going to like this, Mr. Hicks. I know that you think that one of the ways that we can gain some revenue is to raise student fees. In this book that I've been so inspired by, they talk about how important participation in athletics and arts is to help minimize that opportunity gap,
Right.
to equalize the playing field for students from all economic backgrounds. And pay to play is the largest threat to internal equity in a school district.
Any other comments on that? I mean, the more you guys say, the better it helps, because we do have a budget team member here that will, I'll ask Jackie to come on up.
Well, I would just say, it's those kinds of opportunities where you're mixing kids of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and you have the influence of coaches, and you have different experiences, whether they're sports you haven't tried or music you haven't heard, that helps those kids that may not have the benefits from their home life or from where their background, opens all kinds of doors, provides those soft skills that we know launch futures for kids, because they're learning how to work with other people, because they're trying new things, they're communicating in a variety of different ways. Those are the experiences that can really take a student from what might not be a life rich in opportunity to opening all kinds of doors. And that's one of the best things we do in district schools.
It is.
And when we do pay to play, we are not offering the same opportunities to all kids.
Yes, I've gotten complaints about people that said, I cannot afford to let my children play.
Now, I say that, Judy, and I appreciate you hearing that and backing that up.
It's not equitable.
It's not equitable, but I know we don't have money. I mean,
That's right.
it's a scary proposition. Another way to get to equity is nobody gets it, right?
Well,
Either
you know what,
everybody
too?
gets it or nobody gets it. Those are two ways to reach equity.
But we're getting a grant writer, right?
That could help.
That
So
can help.
anything you lift up, we will explore. We will explore. At one of our Meet the Freshman nights earlier this week, I was there, and the statistic at that high school happened to be Liberty, the one I was at that night. 76% of our students at Liberty High School were involved in either a sport or an extracurricular activity of some kind, or a club, some kind of extracurricular. That's a tremendous number. We also have vehicles within our current system. They are tremendously hard to fund, where principals have some purview to waive fees, right? So we have, I'm not saying that fixes your concern or what we're saying, but we have those pieces in place. Where that idea of raising fees came, as the budget committee was like brainstorming, well, where could we find money?
Right.
Nobody wanted to do that.
No, understood.
So that's where that came from.
Is there any way that each site, like a school or whatever, could do some kind of fund drive?
They do that.
They do that already?
They do that in huge ways, in huge amounts, and that's also not equitable. Some sites with this amount of effort are able to raise this much money, and some sites with this amount of much effort are able to raise this much
Well,
money,
is there any way that could be district-wide then, instead of site-based?
perhaps.
Dr. Stifler, I know we had some conversation about a future equity conversation, and that
Yes, ma'am?
and there were a variety of different criteria that we wanted to look at that through, lenses that we want to look at that through. And so while it is encouraging that you say that 76% of the kids at one high school are participating in those, it would be an interesting analysis to see if those are more affluent kids.
Right. Well, from that high school, I would,
Right.
yes.
Because for all those reasons I said, it's so beneficial to all kids, right? The kids that can't afford it or come from families who can't afford it, and I know that we are a benevolent organization and we want to provide opportunity for all kids, but not all kids and their families who might have the need are willing to ask for it.
That's
So-
correct.
So It's a multifaceted issue.
So just for clarification, if I'm hearing teacher retention, that is current people getting a raise, so marching towards giving the biggest raise possible to all staff is something the board prioritized. I didn't hear anybody against that. Retention, last year we did a lot of little measures, so we'll continue to look at that. We heard the staffing, or the testing, we'll continue to look at some of those. Remember, every time we're adding expense on anything means that it's less of a raise from that standpoint. We know class sizes, I will say class sizes are staying the same. They're not going up in that sense. That's the calculation of the staffing with the model. If anything, they're going down just a tiny hair, like a 0.01, which means almost nothing. We're adding a couple specials, so depending on where the kids lie, where 2 of these positions are to increase the number of specials. Fees, I'm not hearing that sounds great. Now, that was a brainstorming item, but it is great to hear it from you guys, because then we can stop the conversation and the budget team. We don't need to waste time if we're hearing that's not an avenue that the board is prioritizing at this point. So I'm hearing, that would be a last ditch kind of thing if we really want to do fees. Behavior, which I think we have addressed, so I think for everything I talked down, we either will address or are currently addressing, is what I hear.
And the 2 advanced ed priorities were technology and, help me please?
Clarifying innovation, they're around technology as well. And
Okay.
clarifying what our instructional model is, I intend to do that within existing budgets.
That's what I was gonna say.
And to do that, but that is going to be a process that's going to take a couple of years to do. And when we have our time on personalized learning, I'll be able to share that at a future study session.
Okay, very good.
But when do you want the report from your
In
committee?
a second
She's
here,
so
so
patient.
I know she's been great, and she is always great, so it's no surprise to me. I put in there capital concerns. I think you guys are probably getting tired of me saying capital concerns. This was really to have the conversation about when we get to the end on this document, it says 1.2. Normally, then we take that and divide it by the 3 groups, and how do we divide it proportionally? Do we modify the amount? Do we weight it? I would honestly say, the lateness of the hour, it's okay, we'll push this to another meeting or another conversation. The next budget update, we could have this conversation if that's okay. Is that okay? So now, as part of our new process, just to make sure, even though I talked a lot about our budget team tonight, and I hope I didn't take anything away or say anything, but part of our budget process is on a monthly basis to have somebody from the budget team come and just give a general quick update and allow you guys just to have any conversation with them. So if it's all right now, I'd like to introduce Jackie Muchler. She's the secretary over at Sunrise Mountain, does an amazing job, and is the classified representative that's been voluntold to be here tonight to give a presentation. So if it's all right, I'll just introduce and let her speak.
Well, good evening.
It's actually, I think it's on the bottom.
I think it's on.
You got
There we
it.
go. Well, good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Superintendent Dr. Darwin Stifler and Mr. Ken Hicks. I'm honored to be here tonight to provide an update, but pretty much everything Mr. Hicks has already shared with all of you. But just that we've been reviewing what Governor Ducey's plan was, where money's coming from, but there's not much money coming, and how we're going to look at projections and assumptions in the 2018 budget to see possibly with certified and classified staffing, what expected changes we might be able to do with that. And also knowing what Prop 206 with, the $800,000, working with that to see where we're going to be with staffing as well. So some of the changes in the budget, see if we can possibly save in certain areas and possibly, give that 1% raise. And that's pretty much kind of where we've been. Our next meeting is February 7th. We do have a committee of about 20 members that give a lot of information, share a lot of information, take information back to their sites, and share it with other people. So I think it's it's a great avenue for the district to have. Any questions?
Thank you for sorting.
Yes, thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, last year you guys said that we can have board members watch. Is that wrong?
It's not illegal about that. It's difficult. I know that no board member means that. Board members have a wake and a presence that changes the tones of conversations. And so, as we discussed what that was, we asked permission from the board to be able to not have Ken or me report, to have real live people report what's going on. We just usurped her report, but she did affirm it with no arm twisting. I want that, no.
Well, I don't know, you introduced her as being voluntold.
Members of the board, that was more of nobody wanted,
Understood.
well, I'm not saying nobody wanted to come to the board meeting. Everybody wants to come to the board meeting. We love
Yeah, right.
board meetings. Yeah, that's evident. I would say it does have an impact. I will tell you, you think about the conversation we had the last 15 minutes of that meeting when everybody's throwing out different ideas. Will you get the same people saying the same thing? I do not think so.
I appreciate your
So,
honesty. Thank you.
I think ask her and pepper her. Now, I've told her, and you correct me if I'm saying something wrong, is we don't lie about anything. If anybody asks, they're not secret and you can't, but we don't go out and tell everybody exactly everything we're talking about because it is sensitive and it could be, we don't mean to hurt anybody in anything, but we are looking at lots of different positions and everything, and some of them may not even come to fruition, and so we don't want to cause any undue stress that's not needed in that sense.
Sometimes when you're thinking fast, stuff comes out, and then you're like, no, it's like.
It happens with me a lot where
Brainstorming.
I will throw out a lot of things, and then when they explain not being at a school, all that they're doing, you're like, wow, now we got to find somebody needs to do all that if you get rid of something like that. So I agree with that you need that.
Thank you.
I think
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack.
It was a very
Thank
good
you.
conversation. The second board meeting of the month will typically be the study session format, which, and I like this type of setup. In the future, I don't want to shut anybody down from talking, but just out of respect for the people that have to be here, to try to keep it around an hour and a half or so. Nothing against you,
Sorry.
Mr. Hicks. I think this was very important, and I think it needed the time and effort.
That's good.
Yes, thank you.
Is there any other questions, comments? Ms. McCarty, since we've kind of adjusted things around, where are we at now?
We are now on request for agenda items for future governing board meetings.
Okay. Is there any request to add anything to future governing board meetings?
I do, Madam President. 3 items that I would like to have considered for future board meeting agendas, if I have any support on these ideas. I would like to launch a discussion about a possible MOU between the district and certified staff. Anyone else?
Do we need
Do we need a
action?
second?
Second.
Yeah.
I second that.
It's our protocol not to put rogue items that only one person wants to talk about on the agenda. So I did have some bullet points, just while you're doing some background information on that.
Thank you.
These questions that I'd like to have addressed would be, would an MOU be only for certified staff, or would it include principals and classified as well? What exactly is an MOU? Which of our peer districts have an MOU and which do not? What are the basic components of an MOU? How would we implement? How do our current employees feel about the prospect of an MOU? And what would be the pros and cons of an MOU from both the teacher perspective and from the district as a whole?
Okay.
And I will give this paper to you when I finish.
Thank you.
Okay, Anybody else want any other information regarding an MOU before I move on to the next one?
What our current policy states.
Regarding an MOU. Got it.
Okay, number 2, do we have any, this is an informational item. Do we have any zero tolerance policies in any area about,
In the study session coming up that has to do with restorative and where we are in discipline, could we include that in that? Would that stretch to that?
that will be fine. That will be fine. And number 3, I request that we have a study session on our current bullying policies, how we handle bullying. And I saw a fabulous presentation today by Dr. R. Bradley Snyder, and he's talked specific from ASU West, and also he's from the Dion Initiative. He gives very concrete ideas about what works and what doesn't. And so if our board can have an opportunity to review that, that would be awesome. And I would help find that presentation if that's helpful.
Okay.
I second that.
Oops, excuse me.
I have some agenda items. 2, one of them being substitutes. What is our current policy, procedures, and timeframes to fill? Just more comprehensive, what are we looking at, our substitutes compared to peer districts?
Does that, we can certainly do that as a board item. Could that also be done as a report that's provided to the board?
Yes.
Or are there some specific discussion items within that you're already aware of?
Yeah, and just because I was a teacher, and especially in special area, I experienced situations where a mainstream class was not filled. I had a special area. I'm the special area teacher, and I was pulled to go to mainstream. Even though those are federally funded kids that have mittens that meet to meet, I wanted to make sure what are we looking at? Is it just a unique situation that I experienced, or is this a continuous situation we're feeling?
I think a conversation about the landscape of our sub-protocols would be a good idea.
Thank you. And the last one, this is just one topic associated with community, and we'll focus on this one, a study session on what our volunteer program looks like. What is our policy? Do we have training? What does that all entail? Because if we have a lot of community members that want to volunteer and they don't know how to get into our classroom safely or be used resourcefully, can we take a look at that? We can utilize our resources. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing for Mrs. Airy to do during a board meeting, and we'll promote it out so everybody knows how they can help.
Was that a second?
Any
Was that
other
a second or not?
items? No?
I heard that we could include that within our community engagement portion coming up, and so I heard that's within current scope, and I'll make sure that it fits.
Thank you.
Mr. McCarty, since we changed the consent agenda, are we now at the items that were pulled from the consent agenda, or are we? Or-
Nothing was.
We are on the informational report section, building, facilities, planning, and construction report.
Okay. And that is, okay, that is the one, the items though that were pulled from the consent agenda. So item, I'm not sure, it's not showing up here.
Informational report.
Okay, that's right,
We're down below,
all right,
or maybe the next page.
Current item that might take you there.
I got
I would recommend you say, there they are, thank you,
Oh.
and go to the next.
it. Okay,
So these are available for our public on our website as a regular basis, just to see what are the regular workings. This is a part of our transparency efforts. And we generally show these at the board meeting, and these were scheduled, but I'm looking to change these to the business meeting.
yes.
So these will only appear once a month.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's an
We are
excellent,
Trying
working
to-
towards that.
I'm trying to streamline it a little bit.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, next item. And this is for the upcoming meetings. There was, see, on February 15th is the parent organization president's dinner, and Mrs. Aries had just told me about that a couple of days ago. So anybody that is interested, it starts at 5:30 at Kenyon Elementary School. And then also I was given the spring patron tour that is at Sunrise Mountain High School, and that it will be Dr. Stifler that will be joining, followed by Frontier Elementary School. And what date is it? Oh, it's March 8th. So those are the two big things coming up. Thank you. Yes, next item. The draft agenda for February 9th. It looks a little bit sparse right now, but I'm sure there'll be things added to it. Thank you very much.
You did some heavy lifting today.
Okay, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Does anybody need to readdress? No. Thank you very much. Next item. And the, I think, long-awaited is the consideration of adjournment. It is an action item. I need a motion and a second.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'd second that.
Okay. And this is a voting item. Members, please vote. Are you
Says
getting-
you.
Pardon? I am not getting,
You're not getting the voting thing?
no, I'm not.
At the very bottom.
Can we take a voice vote?
Just
All
say-
in favor
yep.
to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we're going home. Thank you very much.
Bang your little gavel.
Thank you, everyone.
Not at all.
But I could have withheld some of my comments. You did great. We have to clear something there for you. I thought you did very well.